Hello, NPCs. I am the well-read Mage. Thank you for listening to Magecast. We have launched this new podcast, and we're excited to see what happens. Just wanted to talk about the structure of it for a little bit. The theme of the podcast will be to talk about our emotions, our deep feelings, and our analyses towards a specific video game each episode. We're going to have an ensemble podcast, so it'll be a bunch of rotating guests, hopefully. A lot of people have expressed interest in appearing on the show, so hopefully we'll have a chance to accommodate anyone who is interested. I hope you look forward to some of the episodes to come and some of the games that we're going to be able to get into. You can follow us on Twitter at @thewellreadmage. You can find our main site, thewellreadmage.com. And you can also find us on YouTube at our YouTube channel. I really want to thank all of our supporters, our contributors, the mages, and the warriors of light for helping us to make this podcast possible. We've reached our goal that we've set on Patreon in order to launch this podcast. So I'm very excited for what's ahead. And I just really want to thank everybody who's come alongside and been able to help us make this a reality. So thank you very much. If you're interested in our work and want to help support us, you can check us out at patreon.com/thewellreadmage. Have fun listening. Welcome to the very first episode of Magecast. I'm here with two fairly amazing gentlemen who are actually the founding members of the Well-Read Mage. So this is like the Justice League, except like our movie would be better. I can imagine. So anyways, I wanted to do a little bit of introductions. Who wants to go first? You guys want to arm wrestle for it?
No, Armando would win.
You
can go first.
All right, go ahead.
I would win. Hey, my name is Armando, also known as the Black Humor Mage. You can follow me at that Twitter handle and read one of my glowing reviews of Metal Gear Solid, which is one of my favorite games. Can we go to that now?
Yeah. What are some of your other favorite games?
So my favorite video games, just that Metal Gear Solid series, like in general. I can't really pick my favorite one out of the bunch. Final Fantasy VII.
It's just
I need a jingle.
I just did a list of 111, so I'm good. Start from the 111th game is. What was it? It was DC Online.
I'm gonna list that one next.
Yeah, you should.
Bloodborne and like Chrono Trigger and like a lot of just Mario games. Nintendo, really, in general, all that kind of stuff. I like to have fun, basically.
Having fun is good. What are you playing right now?
Right now, I'm not having fun. I am playing Dark Souls Remastered, which pretty sure I get heart disease from it. Playing it, and like, I try to play two games at once for some reason. I feel like because I have like so many in my backlog, I'm actually trying to play through that and Mass Effect, which. Isn't that a good game?
You're playing Mass Effect?
Yeah, I'm trying, but like the dialogue is terrible.
The first one,
like the voice acting in the first one.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Is
it like Final Fantasy X, like wincy?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
When did that game come out? I've never played.
It's like PS3 or
yeah. Okay. This is actually what we're gonna do is just beg on games that are not Journey. The whole thing. So, all right, good. And we've also got somebody else here. Go ahead.
All right, my name's Cameron. I'm the Timely Mage. You can follow me on, my name is ProtoAvi on Twitter. And my favorite game of all time that will probably carry to my grave is Final Fantasy VIII, just because it came at a very special time in my life and is just my first introduction into that emotional, story-based, multi-layered RPG type of genre. So I really like those types of games. I've been playing them ever since then. And lately I've been playing No Man's Sky. I've been going back to that after the large update that they just did, and just got off of some other really cool games like God of War. And one of the recent indie games that I guess like a hidden treasure would be Cosmic Star Heroine. I really enjoyed that one. I didn't think I would as much as I did, but it really brought me back to like the 90s era, like cartoon shows and really kind of black and white, but it was really cool, really fun battle system and everything. So anyways, yeah, that's what I've been. I always have a game to play. I have a huge backlog. So
The backlog.
Yeah.
I'm playing Cosmic Star Heroine right now too, and it was a pretty great game. I got killed a couple times already from bosses that are pretty tough. I didn't know that your favorite game of all time was Final Fantasy VIII, and now I feel pretty bad for making fun of it all those times.
I thought you did know.
In your presence, I knew he liked it, but I made fun of it prior to myself knowing that he liked it.
Say it's not my. I know it's not the best game of all time.
Right. Okay, and this is an important distinction, ladies and gentlemen, too, is to be able to say that your favorites aren't necessarily like the games that you're vouching for as the best games.
Yeah, like IHOP. You used to make fun of IHOP a lot, and it hurt my feelings because that's like a childhood restaurant of mine.
Okay, IHOP now?
No, that was just a marketing campaign.
Oh, okay. It was terrible. I mean, I guess it got people talking about IHOP.
IHOP, yeah.
IHOP, that is a terrible.
What did you want the B to stand for?
I thought it was breakfast.
Yeah.
Battle Royale.
Battle Royale. Oh boy. But anyway, yeah. I've got several favorite games that are like, this is not the Earthworm Jim is one of my favorite games. I think it's a pretty friggin' good game, but it's not the best game there is, definitely. Okay, so my name is Moses. I'm the Well-Read Mage. You can find me at that Twitter handle. And on the wellreadmage.com and on Facebook and on I just list all this stuff. Just kidding.
LinkedIn.
But yeah, LinkedIn. You can find me
for the Well-Read Mage.
at the DMV app. Yeah, so the three of us, we've done writing, we've done gaming, we've done projects together, we've done all kinds of couple of things together, minus growing up together. I didn't. Did you guys grow up together? No. Okay, just checking. I didn't grow up with you guys, so but we're pretty good friends. Pretty good friends. So I figured, let's talk about this. So the game that we're going to talk about today is Journey. Journey is an indie game by That Game Company for PS3 and PS4. It was released originally in 2012. And it was directed by and developed by Genova Chen. So this game is one that really stands out for me when I think about gaming as a whole. It landed on my 5th favorite game ever in that list of 111 favorite games of mine. But to start off with a question, and we wanted to ask questions of each other and kind of think about this game, is why does Journey stand out so much?
I think just its raw simplicity. I think that's why it's not gilded or steroided out or anything. It's just the game, that's just very, very simple experience that you just kind of do in one sitting usually, because I think it takes away from it if you try to do it in multiple sittings.
Mm-hmm.
So I think because it's more just an experience rather than a game per se.
And that was something that I read too in an interview with the developers, that they were conscious about the game being too long, so that if you had to complete it in multiple sittings, it would kind of lose that sense of impact. Be like watching a movie in multiple sittings, which I actually do all the time since I have children. But
I can't do
Yeah, but it's right. It ruins a lot of the sense of the climax, the emotional impact, the reward of following the character, all that different distance. Excuse me. But why would you say, Cameron, this game is unique?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with Armando, and I say like the minimalism is very important. It's one of the few foundational minimalist games, along with Shadow of the Colossus, that show that very laser focused design toward a specific theme or emotion. How impactful that is in gaming. And I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure. General audiences don't usually always catch on to something so focused as that. So why this one caught on as opposed to others? I think part of it. Well, it came on the scene. Flower beforehand, had also gotten a lot of attention. And for me, that was the cornerstone game for me when it comes to indies. That was my first indie game, and it really opened my eyes to it turned me completely from just I totally played off indies as just throwaway games to being a holy grail for these type of themes. But anyway, so it came at a really good time. So I think that where it wasn't quite as it's starting to become a bit more crowded now. But I think back then it had a bit more room for these superstar indies to shine. And I think a lot of the advertisement that came from like Sony and others that show that this is the future of gaming. This is what an indie can bring to you, and I think that really helps.
Yeah, I think a couple of things I wanted to break down out of that. A lot of good subjects you brought up, and I want to talk about Journey in the context of the other That Game Company games in a little, but to talk about minimalism for a second. What do you mean by minimalist or minimalism?
Well, minimalism, takes it doesn't take any piece of the whole for granted, and in a way it also plays off of that idea of Gestalt, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, or whatever. So every aspect of it is used with intentionality and no more. So less is more, and it's a lot more impactful because it's not lost in excess.
Yeah, and something you and I were talking about before we started recording too was how the gaming industry, in general terms, seems to think that more is more, and it doesn't adhere to the maxim that less is more a lot of the times. And sometimes, like we were talking about too, sometimes you'll see a lot of games reach for minimalism, but only on a superficial level, only on a visual level, let's say. Mm-hmm. Whereas mechanically they're very complex, or their length of play makes them complex. Mm-hmm. Whereas Journey, it seems like there's a lot of things about it that are actually really minimalist, mm-hmm. and not just superficially so. Right. So I think that this game is successful in its minimalism, but I think it's also responsible for the rise in the trend of minimalism as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, before we get to that, what I was going to say about Journey's minimalism is that I think it makes every part equally important, because if you just, the music becomes as important as the gameplay if the gameplay is very simple, and the visuals, become as equally important. And if there's not that much gameplay either, it all becomes, but you got to move forward too and progress. And same thing with the time span. You spend 2 hours with this game, and in that sense, I think the reason minimalism has become important for this game, especially, is that when there's less there, I think it creates less barriers between you and the people who made the game. And I think, in that sense, it becomes more intimate. I think Journey is an intimate game in that sense. It's like very personal because you get to follow one character and maybe another one that joins you later on, and you get to see like the entire journey just in one sitting, where you can't do that with very many games. So I think Journey's impact and the reason why it's so important is just like that intimacy that comes from its minimalism. The fact that you think about all its parts together at the same time, and you only have one goal in mind rather than a bunch of different goals at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, reach the mountain.
Right.
That's it. It's such a simple. It's like it's capable enough to entertain an adult, and yet I played it with my 2-year-old yesterday, and he was into it because it's a simple concept. It's like a storybook fairy tale almost at the same time. Reach the mountain. But I think in that sense, Journey has to work harder than a lot of games do. It doesn't have the busyness to occupy you at an immediate level. There's a lot of inventory management, menu sifting, stats balancing in a lot of games. That's really just busy work, and that's something that I've noticed recently in playing, a variety of different games in different genres. That there's so much busyness in games that's not really all that fun. Some people I'm sure find fun in stats shifting and stuff, allocating points and stuff like that.
If you have the time, I guess.
Right, it can be. I mean, if you're into an RPG, I remember RPGs that I've been really into. I totally enjoyed I'm going to pick this ability. I actually discovered in this this binder that I used for the notes for today, I had old notes for Final Fantasy Tactics about what characters I wanted to name and what job trees I wanted them to have, so I could do a combination of abilities. But that's busy work, and I was 17 when I wrote this up.
And I want to say
this is an old notebook.
It is, yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Those games are designed for that type of
exactly
of an experience. But
yes.
So we want to sound so we're not ragging on it. But for these types of games, indies, that are very minimalistic, laser focused, those are a detriment and not an added value.
Right. Yeah. And to clarify my sense too, I really like Final Fantasy Tactics. That was my third favorite game or whatever. Of all time. But yeah, if you're going to buy a tactical game, you're going to get the busy work.
Yes.
If you buy a massive RPG, you know that you're going to get the busy work. But good point. In an indie, which comes back to the games trying to adopt this sense of minimalism, I think they trip over their own feet sometimes in that they can't let go of the busy work, but at the same time they want to be minimalist. So I'm sort of on the cusp of a lot of indie games as they come out. I'll see the first announcements for them and things like that. And minimalism has almost become a kind of a buzzword where it's I love minimalism because I love Journey. And so this game, I probably like it. But I've played several minimalist games this past year. I'm not going to name any names, but some of them weren't all that great because I don't think they captured a real sense of minimalism beyond just I'm controlling a block versus controlling a fully fledged humanoid character.
Maybe it's the mysteriousness of Journey that helps that minimalism, because I think there's even though we call it minimal, there is a lot in the fact that you don't really know where you're going, but you know that there's something at the peak. And that there's something to be done and to accomplish. You're not just kind of running around, just kind of trying to figure out what to do. It's just what you gotta do. You just go straight for it, and then you just watch your surroundings and just keep pushing forward. And I think like you're saying, it's really focused in that sense. I think if something's minimal, it's trying to be minimalistic, but it's not focused, it just kind of feels like it's kind of everywhere at once in that sense. Whereas Journey is just very streamlined and just you're going up the mountain.
So actually, I thought of a question for you specifically, since I know you enjoy films, which I'm sure you do too. I hate movies. Just kidding.
There was a guy in class once that during an icebreaker for movies, he mentioned that I don't watch movies. And I'm Like, I'm okay if like you watch with like whatever movies, but like no movies at all. That's not normal.
That's strange. But anyway, so I know you like
Cinema.
cinema. You've seen a lot of foreign films, a lot of classic films.
Right.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of minimalist films
True.
too. Do you think that there's a relationship between how those minimalist films convey their emotions and deliver their story and journey?
I think
To put you on the spot, and also
Yeah.
your film professor is listening.
Oh yeah. Dad? No.
Dad.
That's my phone professor. I'm kidding. I don't have a phone professor. I mean, there's a lot of different, like, I guess you could say, like minimalist films. Like, a lot of them, like, I'm thinking of, like, a lot of, obviously, like, French New Wave was, like, very minimalist in the sense that, like, their editing was, like, very choppy and, like, all over the place, and their story was, like, very simple and, like, it wasn't big budget Hollywood or anything, but it did connect with the audience because it's like they're changing the game, they're not doing what's standard, and at the same time too, it's something that the audience could do as well. A lot of these minimalist movies are just like very like simple stories, and it's something that anyone could do. Not everyone can make like a Star Wars or like even like Godfather. Like that thing had a huge budget too. Like those are very good films, but at the same time they're not doable and they're not achievable like by like a person. And because when you can see like minimalism in films, it's something that you pick up like really easily. And it's like a very noticeable kind of way they cut the film together and the way like it goes on and like the music, maybe the lighting is like used very sparsely. And so in that sense, I think with Journey, I think like I said, there's that connection to like you like the way that game company like connects to you as a player because those barriers are broken down. It's the same thing with like minimalist film. Like you connect with it because it feels more human in that sense. It's like not a big budget. It's not ornate or like flowery or anything. It's just simple and like streamlined in that sense.
So, touching back on something we've mentioned a little earlier was a sense of awe and wonder that Journey is able to convey. There's a quote here that I found from Genova Chen where he said, "I started to realize there's an emotion missing in the modern society, and of course missing in the online console games. It's a feeling of not knowing, a sense of wonder, a sense of awe, at the fact that you don't understand, at the fact that you're so small and you're not empowered. And so our focus for Journey was to make the player feel small and to wonder. So when they run into each other in an online environment, rather than thinking about how am I supposed to use my gun on the other player, we wanted them to feel a connection to another player." So I wanted to ask you guys, how true do you think that statement is, that wonder and awe are missing from modern society and specifically in online console games? One of my, not really pet peeves, that's kind of still too strong of a word, but there you go, with Genova Chen, is his generalizations of things. So what do you guys think about that statement, though? Wonder missing from society and from video games.
All right, so so every map is like carefully mapped for every bit of tactical use that it has for the player, and so it becomes way too. There's no awe, there's no like admiration for the beauty of the map too. I noticed like some of these maps are beautiful, but there's no commentary on it. There's no like talk about the aesthetic or whatever. It's just all about, okay, here's the corridor, here's there's a good sniping spot or whatever. Yeah, so you could just like totally remove all the textures and it would just it wouldn't faze anybody that's playing the game. But so when I play other games like when I'm playing right now, No Man's Sky, you get to explore completely uncharted planets with your friends, and each alien landscape will look different. You're the first person to witness it, and it does invoke that sense of awe, and so you don't see that very often, and that's what struck me. I don't want to make this a No Man's Sky podcast, but
maybe we will eventually.
Yeah, but that's what one of the very unique things about that game. That also you can make that correlation with Journey, but I think Journey is a bit more of on a emotional and spiritual level, and where it wants to pull that sense of awe from. And you really get that, especially near the end as you approach the mountain and you get closer and closer to that destination, and then of course the finale. It sweeps you away. So.
Yeah, definitely. And you hit on something that I also wanted to mention, which is this strange spiritual aspect to Journey. The first time I played it, and I reached the finale when after you pass away, or you die, or you fall asleep in the snow, whatever it is, and those white robed figures come and resurrect the player's body, and suddenly you soar up the side of the mountain, was such a triumphant and moving. I thought the most moving moment in the game for me was just flying up the side of the mountain, as my favorite track in the game, Apotheosis, plays. And that one moment, I have not encountered anything like it in gaming since, nor had I before. And it really did feel like a spiritual sort of a feeling to me. It felt like I had died, and that I was ascending to the summit myself, and to be that invested in a character that I only spent an hour and a half, 2 hours with previously, is mind-blowing. How connected and how invested I was in that character, and how much that resonated with me. So now you think about it, like, this is a weird concept to think about the spirituality of video games. There's like not a whole lot there. Typically, and I was talking about this with a few other people, and we tried to list examples, but typically when religion or spirituality is mentioned in games, it's associated with value statements. So like my expertise is in the 90s specifically. That's where I still play. Most of my games are in the 90s. But you have like the 90s JRPGs, where, I mean, I can't think of a specific like example of spirituality being removed from a value statement. It's either like in the form of like a mentor that's like wasting away or fallen or whatever, or some sort of ancient religion in that aspect, or like a cult cover for like demons in like a modern aspect, or in a current present day aspect, excuse me, or like the last boss becoming a god, which is like all over the 90s. Like, like, wouldn't even be surprised if Dr. Robotnik was like, I am going to fuse myself with the live stream or whatever. But anyways, one-winged Eggman. You're listening to this podcast just for that. So, but I don't know if this game resonated with you guys on that level, though. It certainly did for me.
Yeah, definitely for me. Just and with those kind of games that impact you so much, especially at the end, I find it so hard to go back to. I don't want it to like cheapen that moment or whatever. I feel like I had to let it sink in. But it definitely got me to that place. Like you said, connected with that character, if you could call it that. It's more of like an avatar, like
right. Yeah.
It's the only real connection that you have with them is you feel small and you feel curious, and just having that, going on that journey, you feel the same way. Like you said, you feel like you died, and you were brought to that state, and yeah, it totally it got me there as well. So huge impact, payoff.
You know what? Too, I think Journey sounds a lot like a fake video game. from Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Have you ever read that book?
A long time ago.
Like there's I guess like some kind of like video game, I guess you could say, but like they didn't even have that back when they built that. So, but it's like you're moving like basically like an avatar up the mountain, and like you're constantly like falling back and back, and then but like your whole goal, but it's like a religion too at the same time. This video game, so like you're moving up and up the mountain to reach a peak, and I guess the point of the game was to like just basically teach you compassion, and so
that's a common theme across like world religions too.
Yeah,
like
it's
compassion and compassion. Yeah,
and then just struggle too. I think especially because like that's what a lot of religion and like spirituality is like a struggle between like life. And so I think in a sense this game did feel spiritual, and that you're following along an avatar that's like supposed to be almost you, and you and this avatar or yourself are trying to get up to this mountain. It becomes, and I think like it's like part of the mysteriousness in the journey of going to like towards a goal, like that's kind of spirituality in the sense of like like Islamic religions, you go to Mecca, or like and other, I think, is it Buddhist that do like Nirvana
pilgrimages? Nirvana, yeah,
like reaching like an ascended state in that sense. And so I think like it correlates with that kind of with that that kind of thing, like pilgrimage, reaching like an ascended state.
Right.
And
that's apotheosis. That title is the word means like to reach a divine state, or the culmination, a climax of growth in that sense. But yeah, and I jotted down too, do you think that journey is about punishment, penance, or atonement? Like looking over the whole story, you have this figure that appears in the desert, and they're compelled for some reason that we don't understand until we piece things together, to journey to this mountain, which eventually kills them. And there's this moment too, before I finish that thought, there's this moment too where, and I only noticed it this time, where the character notices in one of the glyphs that they're going to die on the way up the mountain. It shows them kind of crumpling over, but you still go anyway. And I thought that was interesting because it's like the journey is unavoidable. Death for ourselves is unavoidable. It's part of our journey. And yet you have to go anyway. You have to go toward the mountain.
Still do it.
Right. So then after reaching the mountain, you've discovered that this civilization has fought over the resources, and they've annihilated their ecosystem and each other. Only their war machines survive them. And you're this red-robed figure that's sent down from the stars to experience this journey. So then are you... is this reincarnation, or is it salvation? Or is it both? Is it atonement, or is it punishment? Are you doomed to repeat this? Because after you reach the mountain, that comet travels back to the beginning. And at first I was like, well, are you stuck in a loop? Or is it just, one guy that's doing it over and over again? Or is it, multiple entities that are doing it over and over again? Or is it one person? Each person gets their chance to experience this journey again.
I think it's like meta in that sense. The fact, and I think including like another person to join you along the journey makes that kind of almost clear. Like what this is that we are literally like ourselves are connecting to this experience and to the singular kind of pilgrimage and journey. And so I don't know where we come from, or if we. Like in the game, I guess you could say like I don't know where that avatar exactly like comes from,
right?
Like in part of the lore, but it's just kind of supposed to be us, I think, and I think in that sense, like it makes it like meta, almost. And so we're like literally like ourselves are moving up the mountain, and whoever joins us is whatever their background or whoever kind of person they are, they're just there with you to ascend up the mountain.
Right. Yeah, and it's beautiful in its simplicity in that sense because, like you use the term meta. I feel like if this game were made more clumsily, it would, attempt to break the fourth wall all the time. It would attempt to tell you it's a game telling you about your life, rather than it just being this journey that resonates with you and you find yourself in. Like it's a metaphor for life, I think.
Yeah, and I want to like also, because it's the obvious and easiest and most relatable part of this game is that it's a journey for our life that occurs over like a lifetime. But I also want to maybe propose that it's like it can recur. It's not that it could be more of a season of our life. We all go through ups and downs, and we have kind of like the cycle, and where we start at the beginning of this journey, everything's new and amazing, and then we get to where there's more struggle and then you start to lose some of that hope or whatever, and then you come out of it, and I mean, then you end up maybe even because at the end he dies, and it's not just like overcoming it, but he was helped out, not only throughout the journey, but at the very end, that it was those white robed figures that brought him to that end. And I think the one of the main focuses of this game is not in it's not just making it to the mountain. It's about making it to that mountain, that journey with another person, and understanding the value of that connection with other people, and and so you will go through that cycle throughout your life. You'll multiple times, most likely you'll have connections, you'll lose them, whether you move away, whether you somebody dies, or a fallout from a bad argument, something like that, and then you'll but the most sacred times are when you're brought up from that state of being on the floor and just broken by another person, and restoring your hope in that humanity and in life. So I think this is not just just a commentary on our entire life from beginning to end, but on just a recurring basis, you'll get to experience that.
It's quite sobering. And this is a video game podcast. But that's good. This is why I like video games. And this is why I like talking about them. And the way that they can reflect back at you. But you mentioned the multiplayer in Journey is one of my favorite multiplayer systems I've ever seen. We were talking earlier about like how does the game initiate multiplayer, and I don't necessarily want to get into all the technicalities over a podcast, but it's just bizarre how like an area can feel like a lobby for just two people, but it seems like the lobby actually follows you because it's your proximity. The interesting thing about the multiplayer in Journey is how much it emphasizes the value of human companionship and the value of having another person with you in life and in your journey and in this game. So like I just replayed it yesterday, and I actually met two people, and I was like, why are there still people playing this game like 6 years later? And it doesn't have a ton of replay value. And there's a lot of people like yourself, Cameron, who will play it and hang on to that experience. I hadn't played it previously for close to 3 years. So now it's the sort of game that you play all the time. But so I was surprised to meet human beings in the game again, and I journeyed for a while with someone for a few areas, and I showed him a couple secrets that I knew about, and we had fun, doing that little musical language like stuff that they do, which is just genius to not have actual text, of dialogue in this game. Takes away being trolled by 13-year-olds, But I lost that companion about halfway through the game and felt overwhelmingly sad.
There's no way to get him back.
I don't know, because I don't understand like the mechanics of Journey's multiplayer, but I waited, and then I was like, is he ahead of me? Is he behind me?
They just kind of disappear.
and they kind of disappear, right? Because however the game works, it seems like if you lose them at a certain point, then that you're done with a companion. So, of course, it was in that the underground area where you're being pursued by the war machines and stuff like that, and it's just like, I really want a friend right now, even though you can't do anything really with each other. You can help each other to float a little longer, and you can do that, musical language. But it's not like the friend gives you any material value. Just like a real friend, unless you know some like sugar daddies that are like give you real material value, like here's $100. But friends, though, don't like, what is the C.S. Lewis quote? They don't give you, any
was it? I know.
value to life, right? Something like that. Doesn't have any survival value, but it gives value to survival.
Yeah.
One of those like wordplay C.S. Lewis quotes, but which I totally agree with. I mean, you can live your life like a dude walking up this holy mountain without friends, all alone, and be miserable. You can live your life without. I know several people who are like, well, I hate humans. Like, well, I don't think you could really live without humans. I mean, you kind of need human beings. It seems like are built with some sort of need for companionship. And this game is able to touch on that fundamental human need to be with somebody in a way that games with much more robust online systems don't accomplish at the same level. So like a game we were playing a while ago, Monster Hunter World, fun game, long game, much bigger than Journey, with much more detailed online multiplayer capabilities. The ability to talk over the headphones, things like that, gestures and text and whatnot, which makes you feel like the person is really there. But on an emotional level, it was not the same thing as Journey. And I really haven't found anything, like Journey at the same emotional level. So
yeah, and I wanted to make that correlation because you have co-op games, but this is different, and this is more than a co-op game, because which is almost the entire gaming industry, co-op or competitive. Yes,
and that's it for your multiplayer.
In a lot of ways, co-op is still competitive,
right?
Because,
yeah,
because you're competing in your final score or you're competing in your competence. Because oftentimes when I'm playing, and I don't play a lot of multiplayer, but whenever I do play with online people in co-op, or even just on the same team, you hear in team chat, I mean, you're always talking about each other's competence, whether somebody messes up and, and then they just like, oh man, we've got this loser on our team.
Right,
yeah. It's just like, so you always feel like, I got to prove myself. I've got to, you got to earn your way, earn your respect or whatever, something that you have to work for. And this game just totally removes all of that and says, let's, we're not just working towards the same goal. We are, partners on this journey, and that's
on equal footing.
Exactly.
Right.
And like you said, there's no, you don't really add that material value to each other as far as like, giving each other items or, boosting each other's score. So. It's just they're geniuses. I don't know how they did it, because there's so many ways this thing could have gone wrong. You
could have just ignored the other player.
Yeah, you could ignore. You could have. I mean, you got people that just love to troll. How do you stop that kind of thing and keep that experience intact? It could have been ruined in so many different ways. But I think that's one of the most genius parts of the game that you kind of take for granted, or is easy to take for granted. But I'm sure a lot of time and playtesting went into fine-tuning that, because there's so many ways people like to mess around with other people, even just for fun, But
yeah, that was one of real quick. That was one of my first thoughts when I played Journey was, can I just ignore somebody and make it to the end? You can, sure. but I think you lose a part of what makes this game special.
Yeah, big part.
When I played Journey, like I ran into two different people, and what's it called? One of them like went with me like about like 25%, the other one like the other 25, and then like the rest of the half I was kind of on my own in that sense. But I think it was really interesting because it's like you can't pick them. You don't know where they come from, or like what their username is, or any of that. It's just their presence is there with you, and I think it's that sense of like presence of like you don't know this is a stranger, but you're both experiencing like this at the same time, and you know we both have the same goal, and you're both just kind of you're experiencing the same thing, and I guess that level of like companionship and presence, and that you know that someone else, there's actually like someone else sitting like playing with you. You start to think about it, especially because you didn't pick this person. And I think in some sense, I don't know if like Journey was like trying to emulate real life, or like there's a certain set of circumstances in how you meet people. You don't really choose too much about the people you meet, but like you just kind of run into them, and then from there it kind of takes off.
Right. Like it's been said, you don't choose your friends. You know, like they come into your life.
Yeah, they just come into your life. I mean, I think you do choose like how far you'll go with them in that sense.
And
I
choose
think
to spend time with them.
And choose to spend time. Yeah. But like, as far as like meeting, that's just like you can't control that. And how you're gonna like who you're gonna meet and how you're gonna meet. Like if I could choose who my friends were, I'd just pick like any billionaire and ID set. Yeah. But I think in that sense, it's interesting how they use a multiplayer, like, cause like I mean, when you're doing like I play like Overwatch a lot, and so like you see all the usernames, and you're all supposed to like be like it's like a team sport, like that's what like multiplayer games are. It's just like it's sport, and so I mean there's a sense in like teams, but like you see their usernames, and you're kind of like doing different roles, and you're doing different things, and you're trying to like just be competitive with each other, too, and with the other team. But that's just the game itself, you're not, I don't feel like you're experiencing the same exact thing or like anything very similar.
Right.
And so I think with Journey, that's the point of like having a companion that you don't know who they are or where they come from, but you know that you're together and that you have each other's presence in that sense. And so you feel that.
Yeah. And that level of that rawness of it's like, it's a human personality, but there's no attachment of the stigma of race or ethnicity or gender or identity or any other social aspect. You don't know what their job is. You don't know where in the world they live. You don't know what language they speak. And all of those things, if they had been inherent in the game, like imagine how different this game would be if a flag was over every avatar that said what country that person was playing in. That would automatically allow us as human beings to insert our own prejudices and our own inability to interact with each other. So Journey does, again, coming back to that minimalism, so specific in that, there could have been all these things. There could have been dialogue. There could have been FaceTime in the game. There could have been all these things so that you could talk more directly, but it's almost as if that directness would have taken away from the level of companionship. It's almost like having a pet, except a pet owner relationship implies a hierarchy, and there's no pet owner relationship in this. It's partner and partner. But you can't communicate with your pet the same way you can communicate with a human being. So I think that's why some humans have a more emotionally attached relationship to their pets than to other people. Yeah. So couple more things just to start wrapping this up. I threw it out on Twitter today. If anybody had any questions or thoughts about this game, tweet it out and we'll mention it possibly on the podcast. I say possibly because Twitter's an interesting place. You never know what could pop up. But good old Fritzjalgia said, Journey's soundtrack being nominated for a Grammy is an interesting milestone for the gaming industry. Now, I actually didn't know that this game was nominated for a Grammy, so I went back and looked at it, and I thought that was fascinating. The very first video game ever to be nominated for a Grammy is this game, and it deserves it. I mean, the soundtrack is phenomenal. Now, a short, funny story. A little while back, I created a meme because I saw this guy. I can't remember his name. I probably should have looked it up. If you're listening, I apologize, sir. But it was somebody who loved metal and not the material, the music. To be honest. Anyways, all these asides. Anyways, he created this image that compared Nicki Minaj to this metal band, and like their lyrics, and Nicki Minaj's lyrics was "You a stupid hoe" over and over again. I guess that makes this an M-rated podcast. Just kidding.
That's PG-13.
It was PG-14. Well, and then it had the lyrics on the other side for the metal band, and at the bottom he was like, interpretation, she doesn't like someone. And then the interpretation on the other hand was like something profound.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that'd be really funny if it was for a video game. So I can't remember what song I did it for. Oh, it was for the final song on Journey, I Was Born for This. And I did it, and it had Nicki Minaj, the same example that he gave. And then I did this song, and I was like, the meaning is that like we're on this journey together, and like we have to complete it, and stuff like something like that, something general. And some people thought it was interesting. I think some people got that it was like a quasi meme, and then a couple people seemed offended that I did it. So one guy thought I was serious, and I clarified. I was like, I'm not dying on this hill. It's just a funny observation. And he was like, oh, okay. And then one guy was like, he said, I would never listen to the Journey, and this is not verbatim, I would never listen to the Journey soundtrack outside of playing the game Journey, but I listen to Nicki Minaj all the time. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, but I listen to the Journey soundtrack all the time. So I looked it up. Actually, Journey and Nicki Minaj have the same amount of Grammys, 0. So I just thought that was an ironic.
So it's kind of like, whether you're rich or poor, you're buried the same way kind of thing.
Sure.
Like, unless you have a pyramid or something.
Yeah. So anyway, the music by Austin Wintory is fantastic. He created a dynamic soundtrack that adapts and evolves and changes as you're playing the game, as you recall. Sometimes it'll change based on your actions and as you move through the areas, morphing as it goes in. It's an absolutely incredible soundtrack. Now, we've all heard orchestral soundtracks to death. You're a movie fan. Like, I mean, even summer blockbusters have orchestral soundtracks.
Yeah.
So that it's not, in that sense, it's nothing special based on its commonality. But this soundtrack is extremely special. Moving. I listen to Apotheosis all the time. I use it to write to. I would listen to that song every day if I could. And I could because I have access to it, but I probably should just start doing that. But anyways, all that to say, I think that the music is a huge part of how Journey conveys itself to the player. So.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of the first video game soundtracks I ever bought, alongside like Flower and a few others. But I still listen to it, and it's super inspiring. Most of Austin Wintory stuff is just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But
even the Flow soundtrack.
Well, yeah,
super good.
Yeah, it's just so moving on its own. But when you tie it into the game, that experience, you relive those moments, but not just even the moments, like just the themes and the feelings that you had at the time, makes it even much more special.
It's almost like you could forget imagery and detail, but it's difficult to forget emotion. Mm-hmm. I think that's why nostalgia is as powerful as it is. Mm-hmm. And really that goes back to Genova Chen's interest in entertainment as a vehicle for emotion, and why this game is probably as emotional as it is. But what are some of your thoughts on the music, on the soundtrack, Armando?
I think the music in some ways might be the most important part of the experience in the game. I mean, and it's the same thing with movies. You know, you have to call it sight and sound because it's not just like what you're looking at. Because a lot of what you're hearing too, like, really just like informs like how you feel and it tells like the way the song moves or the way, you know, however it may sound to you. You know, that kind of informs like the emotion and how it makes you feel. So with Journey, you know, it's like definitely like there's like a lot of beautiful visuals, but the music is there like I don't even think to accompany it. I think it's there to it's just within the DNA of the game itself. It feels like, you know, and you move along with the music, and the music is part of what you're doing in your experience and the way you're going about things. And then so in that sense, and it's just a beautiful soundtrack on its own. But like in relation to the game, it is the game to me. You know, the music is, and along with the visuals and along with the fact that you're moving and the, you know, whatever plot or lore there may be, it's just kind of there and stitched into it. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And here's a timely fact.
Timely fact.
Hashtag.
Timely fact.
Yeah.
You need to start using that
Trademark.
right away.
In the game, you're represented by the cello, and then as you get closer to your partner in the game, you know, like you said, it's dynamic. It mixes in some other instruments alongside just the bass sound. There's the harp and the viola, I believe, yeah. So I mean, like you said, I mean, it's intertwined in the. I mean, you can't move or do anything without it, you know, impacting the music, and vice versa. You know, it completely is tied into the emotional direction of the game, and you know, lives on every moment depending on what you're doing. You know, which is the beauty of the creativity. You know, you can do stuff like that where your actions influence the soundtrack. I mean, you know, what else? You know, what other kind of medium can you do that in? You know?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very unique thing about games. Well, and even too unique within the gaming industry itself. But the music being a language itself, the music telling the story of Journey just as much as the visuals telling the story, is one of the things that makes this game special. So to close off with a couple of questions, gentlemen, coming back to something we mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, which was the context of that game's company's other games. So they're producing Sky, that I don't know too much about, but I've played Flow and Journey. Hopefully, I've played Flow and Flower. I know you have. Have you played both?
I played both a little bit.
Okay.
Completely, but
Yeah, I find Flow really enjoyable. As sort of like a trance state inducing game. Not like if it had like psychedelics or anything, but just like it's a game that you can sort of lose yourself into, simple goals and stuff like that. And then Flower is much more story oriented than Flow is, but Journey for some reason stands out from Flow and Flower. Well, I'm sure it's because of all the things we've discussed, but why would you say that's the case, if you even agree with that statement? Because I mean, surely Journey does stand out.
Yes.
yeah.
From the context.
I agree.
Why? I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, I can't think.
Now, of those three, it's the last to be made, so it has the benefit of picking up from everything they've learned previously.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, like, it is a more like shallow answer to it. You know, Flow was really like a really good experiment in minimalism and game design or whatever. You know, the mechanics are very simple, and Flower, you know, also was kind of the foundation, you know, when it comes to conveying that emotion through game design as well in a minimalistic way. You know, it didn't quite have, you know, but Journey, you know, was kind of that culmination of where every aspect, I think, you know, it had a very defined beginning and end journey, and See, that's where I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to put it into words. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
What about you, Armando? What do you think about Journey in the context of That Game Company's games?
I liked what Cameron said. I do think Flow was like more of an experiment within like game design. I think that was really apt.
It was timely, but
Timely.
just insert that in front of everything that he says.
Okay,
Timely.
well, Black humorly put, I think the flow was much more mechanical, and there's like a feeling to and I don't think there's too much visually going on with flow either. And I think with Journey, we didn't touch too much on the visuals, but the visuals are there, and it's like a moving painting almost. And it's like, but even the art itself is like very minimalist. It's like very, like its palette is like has like a certain palette that it sticks to, and like the way things move is just very kind of like almost cartoony looking. But I'm not saying that that's bad. And with Flower, I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just because it's a bunch of flowers.
Yeah, it's hard to find an avatar in Flower.
Exactly. I was about to say that I think that's the defining aspect that makes that very personal and impactful connection, is having that avatar, that I think the others don't quite have. I mean, obviously play as a petal or as, an anemone, but but to have this character that you can move in a semi relatable way to how you move, and can interact in a semi relatable way that you interact with other people and the world around you, makes that you're more easily able to infuse yourself into the game than maybe you could with the other games. So you're able to experience the minimalism and the emotional context a lot more poignantly than and a lot more directly than you could with the other games. The other ones, you felt like maybe you were more being told this emotional story. Journey, you're a part of that story, and I think that's the key difference there.
So that just proves that representation matters, and you need a biped.
Well, I mean, the avatar itself is like, there's like no ethnicity, no gender to it. Like,
Right.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
Or it could be anyone.
Right. Couldn't. Well, we don't even know that it's human.
Yeah, that too. But
Right.
because it's bipedal and it's wearing.
It's more closely related to our form of life.
Yeah.
So
it's humanoid.
Yeah,
in
than a
sense.
flower, or than like a snake, like
That's probably
protozoa. Yeah. So, but I think Journey, of the three, Flow, Flower, and Journey is the most capable in conveying what it wants to convey. Flower is extremely beautiful, but I don't think it's as emotional as Journey. Flower has death in it, but I think that the three of us could possibly say that like plant death and human death are like on two different planes of impact.
Yeah, and to be fair, like there were times in Flower I did have a really I felt myself in there. I had that emotional connection.
Right, and to be totally clear, to me as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I just mean in terms of level or degree of emotion.
Yeah, and then and I think I'm sorry, all these thoughts are coming to me, in a more fragmented manner. But another thought is, I think with Journey being a singular journey, as opposed to like Flower and Flow, are more, split into chunks. And I think, as you mentioned before, like how, you can, they wanted to have it where you can complete it in a single sitting, as opposed to Flower. You could play one of the levels in a single sitting, and you could play the whole thing if you really wanted to. But it was very defined, distinctly, split off into different sections of the game, different levels. Journey, was told, very linearly.
So, how can people make more games like Journey? It's been 6 years since Journey first came out. The final question I'm going to ask you guys is going to be regarding what games you would recommend that are similar to Journey. We're not at that question yet, though. How do you think people can make games like Journey?
I think just having one like solid experience. In the fact that maybe part of Journey's like appeal and experience is the fact that it can be finished like in one sitting. And I think if more games wanted to be like that, just to do more different, just kind of do different music, different goals, different art style, you could kind of have the same game as Journey, but would it just be basically emulating Journey? I don't know. It's kind of hard. It's a pretty special game. I do think of like some games that where like it emotionally connects. Like I don't know why the Binding of Isaac comes to mind, because I think that's a game about where like the indie developer he calls it that because like his mom tried to like kill him as a child, and like in order to be like a sacrifice to God, because she's just a very crazy woman, and so he calls it the Binding of Isaac to make like a metaphor to like Isaac in the Bible in a sense, and so I think using that as like a metaphor and to like do his own pain and suffering into like a video game, I think that's the way you could like make it emotional in that sense.
Yeah, and I liked. I would say for me, I'd say having that laser focus on the theme or the emotion that you want to convey, and building your game around it is super important. You can get caught up in like, oh, I love this, battle system, and I want to integrate that into my project, or I love this visual design, but you often don't think, but it's harder to get to the place where, you need a lot more self-control to say no to some of those things and really think, does this add value to this one single thing that I want to convey to the player, and to make that decision to cut something that maybe you love or
is popular.
Yeah, it's popular. Yeah, and so I think that's the beginning of a masterpiece there.
Yeah, I think that there's trends in every industry. Following and chasing what's popular is why the indie scene exploded too, and now you have trends within the indie scene as well. Ebert said, "Games can never be art. Not they are art or not are not art." But he said they can never be art. His reasoning was games are about vaporizing an enemy, earning a high score, rescuing a princess, winning, and you cannot win art. So, what do you think about his statement in light of Journey? Was he right or wrong?
I think I guess he was wrong, because I do think video game is art. Whether it's a masterpiece, it's just subjectivity. If you like Call of Duty, that's your art. But I think if you think about it, most video games, it's kind of limited in its storytelling, because you have to do actions, and like what more actions can you do other than to hit things with the sword or shoot things or just get something, and so I think maybe that's what made Journey so different, was the fact that it's telling its story, and it's part of its story is not that you have a sword, and it doesn't give you any weapons, it doesn't give you any kind of actions to do other than just maybe just floating around
your scarf, that's about it.
And that's about it, and maybe telling a story in that sense, makes Journey a different way to tell a story, and just because, you have like a game like Breath of the Wild, and there's a ton of weapons in that game, but is the game so hard? Yeah. But if you want to say that maybe video games are limited in its storytelling, I think so, because most video games is just you have a sword or a gun, or you have your fist or something. It's all mostly about that objective. And so I think if more games did want to be like Journey, maybe perhaps think of new ways in order to mechanically achieve something within the game. And maybe, I guess there is achievement. Well, because Roger Ebert did say that, like, because you can't win in art. I think...
Do you win at Journey?
You do win at Journey, so that kind of takes away from that.
Well, you think about, like, how do you lose at Journey? There are obstacles, but they're fairly easy to overcome.
Yeah.
Given patience, you can overcome the game. So really, the obstacle is in yourself. Even the enemies that you encounter, the war machines, won't kill you. They can't kill you. They'll cut your scarf short. So even that just slows you down,
Mhm.
you know? So it's like, if you think of a book and journey, is finishing a book winning that book? Is finishing Journey winning Journey, when both just required patience from the reader and from the player? So I don't know that Journey is a game that you win exactly.
But I would say
You can complete it.
You can complete it, yes.
But even then, games where you do win, they can still be art. And I'd say, who says that you can't win at art? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
exactly.
Who said that?
Yeah,
Who's
he's
the authority?
dead, so-
You know, that
Yeah.
determines that. I don't see how that's a qualifier
Right.
for one.
Well, here's an example specifically that just popped in my head. Dance. Dance is recognized around the world as an art form. There is competitive forms of dance. There are competitive forms of dance. In my own culture, Hawaiian culture, dance was a big part of the ancient Hawaiian culture, and there's a level of skill that's involved. There's a level of tutelage and learning and all those things that you would do if you were in a competitive scene as well. And even today, then there's hula contests too. So I think that you've hit a good point. That who says games, can't be art because art can't be won.
But dancing is still dancing, whether you have a contest or not. Sometimes dancing is just to dance.
Right.
And so I think with every game, it's just you can't have a game without trying to beat an objective or something,
Mm-hmm.
or without like dying, game over and all that. But Journey doesn't have a game over. It doesn't. You can't really lose in the game. So can you really win either? It's just you're really following the experience.
Complete it, yeah.
You're completing
Just like a book, yeah.
Just like a book, just like a movie.
From start to finish. Yeah, a movie. Yeah. Hopefully you're not walking around saying, I won that movie.
Yeah,
You completed watching the movie. Yeah.
But because your avatar has one set goal. And it's the only thing that really can happen if you complete it the same way you finish reading a book, the same way you finish watching a movie.
And I think that the definition of games as art that we would agree upon is that games are an art form that are fundamentally art in that they're the result of creative processes from human beings. But that does not mean that every game individually is a work of art in terms of a masterpiece. You and I, the three of us have played poor games, I'm sure, before. I play them all the time and get a special sort of enjoyment out of them. But to bring this all to a close, gentlemen, maybe share one or two games that you can think of that you would recommend that are similar to Journey. I know that's a lot to throw at you after we've talked about how unique Journey is, so I'll go first. I think that Rime and Hyper Light Drifter were two games that are... Sorry, I stole your Hyper Light Drifter. Okay, if you want to say Hyper Light Drifter, I'll say Bound instead. And it's Stayed. That was weird. I'll say...
Should we start over?
Nah, that's fine. Keep it in here. I'll say Bound instead. Bound and what was it that I said? Rime are similar to Journey in terms of their focus on linearity. Maybe not so much Bound because it's fragmented as far as the dream sequences, but anyways, for the illustration sequences, you got to play that game. But their focused storyline, their lack of dialogue. Bound has a little bit of dialogue. Rime, I think, does not. Because I played through it once. Yeah, I don't think it has.
No.
And Rime is very much focused on emotion.
Yes.
Very powerfully so. So, go ahead.
Well, yeah. So obviously, Hyper Light Drifter.
Hey, glad you thought of that one.
Probably did before you said it.
And so I've been together this whole time. And Shadow of the Colossus is a good one. Very, I think it's a little bit harder to distinguish the the emotion or the theme behind it. I mean, it's more open to talk about or debate. But when it comes to minimalistic design, that's obviously one that's referenced a lot, and I think rightfully so. Yeah, but yeah, so those are definitely a couple.
Thank you for listening to our very first episode. You can find us at thewellreadmage.com, on Twitter at thewellreadmage, patreon.com/thewellreadmage, and on Facebook at the Well-Read Mage page. The Magecast theme song, Post Atmosphere, was composed by fellow mage Russell Gordon and can be found on his YouTube and SoundCloud. Thank you for listening.